SpaceX accelerates IPO, the $800 billion question. Hey, welcome back. So if you've been following the world of tech and space, you've probably seen some wild headlines about SpaceX flying around. The numbers are, let's be honest, astronomical. We are going to cut through all that noise and figure out what is really going on. Let's get right into it. So this is the number that's been making all the waves, $800 billion. I mean, just let that sink in. Reports were saying that SpaceX was in talks for a share sale that would value the company at this staggering figure. That would easily make it one of the most valuable private companies on the entire planet. But the big question is it for real? And right as that hype train was leaving the station, this happened. Elon Musk himself jumped onto his social media platform X and just flat out denied it. He said any claims about SpaceX raising money at an $800 billion valuation were, and I quote, not accurate. So what gives? You've got this massive valuation report and then a direct denial from the guy in charge. Well, that's the mystery we are going to solve today. Okay, so this brings us to our first big question. What is actually happening behind the scenes here? It turns out the whole thing comes down to a really crucial bit of financial jargon that separates what's real from what's just hype. You see, Musk's denial all hinges on a very specific choice of words. He said SpaceX is not raising money, and you know what? He's technically right. The company itself isn't creating new stock to get cash for its operations. What was really being talked about is something completely different, and it's called a secondary sale. So what is a secondary sale? Well, you can think of it as a way for insiders to finally cash in. Imagine you are an early investor or a long-time employee, and a huge chunk of your personal wealth is tied up in company stock you can't touch. This lets you sell some of those shares to other private investors. You get paid, they get a piece of the company, and the company itself, it doesn't see a dime of the money. And this right here really lays out the difference perfectly. When a company is raising new capital, it's like they are baking a bigger pie. They add more ingredients, new shares, and the money goes right to the company so it can grow. A secondary sale, though, is like someone selling their existing slice of the pie to somebody else. The pie doesn't get any bigger, and the company's bank account stays exactly the same. And that is the key to how Musk could say SpaceX isn't raising money. Okay, so even if it's just insiders cashing out, that incredible $800 billion number had to come from somewhere, right? It's what these new investors are willing to pay. So what's really driving this absolutely massive valuation? Let's take a look under the hood. The value of SpaceX today really boils down to two main things. On one hand, you have the proven cash-generating machine that is Starlink. And on the other, you have the absolutely audacious, world-changing bet that is Starship. Let's break them down. First up, let's talk about Starlink, the company's satellite internet service. Its growth has been nothing short of explosive. The latest reports show it's already serving over 8.5 million subscribers all around the globe. that creates a really powerful and predictable stream of recurring revenue. You could say this is the financial bedrock of the whole operation. And believe it or not, the projections are even crazier. Analysts are expecting Starlink to be pulling in a staggering $22 billion in revenue every single year by 2026. Now, to put that into perspective, if you just apply a standard valuation multiple to that kind of revenue, you could justify a valuation in the hundreds of billions just for Starlink alone. This is the engine that funds everything else. And this is right here is why SpaceX has been so successful. Just look at this insane cost disruption. Back in the day, the NASA Space Shuttle cost about $60,000 to send a single kilogram into orbit. SpaceX, with its reusable Falcon 9 rockets, has just crushed that number, bringing it down to under $3,000. This isn't just a small improvement, it's a complete reinvention of the economics of getting to space. But the real long-term gamble, the thing that gets investors dreaming about trillion-dollar valuations is Starship. This is the fully reusable, super heavy rocket that's designed to make going to other planets a routine thing. If this actually works, it could completely dominate the launch market for decades to come and open up entirely new economies in space. It's a huge if, but the payoff is incredible. So all of this jockeying around in the private market leads us to the next obvious question. When are the rest of us going to get a chance to buy a piece of this? Well, that brings us to the potential timeline for an IPO. So, based on what we are hearing from investor discussions, there seems to be a rough timeline taking shape. We are in the first phase right now, right? These big secondary sales are kind of testing the waters to see what the market will bear. If all goes well, the target seems to be for an actual IPO sometime in late 2026. But hold on, because here's where it gets really interesting. An IPO for the entire SpaceX company. The whole shebang might not be the only way they do this. There's another pretty compelling strategy that's been gaining a lot of steam. What if they just spin off one part of the business? I mean, just look at the strategy here. A Starlink only IPO could be an absolutely brilliant move. It would raise a ton of cash to fund the super expensive development of Starship, all while letting SpaceX keep control of its golden goose. And maybe most importantly, it gives public investors a clear choice. Do you want to invest in a stable, growing internet business? Or do you want to bet on the high risk, high reward deep space venture? It neatly separates the two. So whether SpaceX decides to list the whole company or just spin off Starlink, the sheer amount of money we are talking about tells a much bigger story. This isn't just about one company's finances. The rise of SpaceX is a huge signal that something fundamental has changed. It's kicking off a brand new commercial era in space. You know, for decades, space was basically owned by governments and their space agencies, but not anymore. Now, private companies are in the driver's seat, and they are not just taking contracts from the government, they are creating their own businesses from satellite internet to pharmaceutical research and zero-G. But all this rapid expansion is happening way faster than the laws can keep up, which is creating a kind of legal Wild West in orbit. I mean, think about it. If a satellite from a company in one country crashes into a satellite from another, whose court do you go to? Who's liable? Or what if you invent something amazing on the way to Mars? Which country's patent law applies? These aren't small details. They are the fundamental questions we have to answer to build a real economy in space. And this legal gap isn't just a problem, it's becoming a new kind of competition. Different world powers are now literally racing to make their legal framework the one everyone else has to follow. As you can see here, the US is pushing this public-private partnership model. China, on the other hand, is going for strong state control over everything. And then you have India taking yet another approach, saying the state owns any or all intellectual property developed in space. The race for space is now also a race to write the rule book. Which brings us to our final big question. When we see a story like SpaceX and its mind-boggling valuation, are we actually watching the financial foundation for humanity's future among the stars being built? Or are we just seeing the next big wave of private market hype fueled by big promises and very little transparency? The answer is probably going to shape not just our financial portfolios, but our future in the cosmos.